Alright, so I'm going to continue with my stash busting here. I have just a little bit of yarn left, so I think I can make another little scrubby. And we are using, for this one, I'm using a G hook, or 4.25 millimeter, and we're going to work in slip stitch, because that doesn't use up that much yarn. And it's a nice dense stitch, which I like for scrubbies. That's why I prefer using Tunisian crochet for scrubbies, but I don't think I have enough. So you can use this, I'll probably use it as a face scrubby, or you can use it as a dish scrubby. Yeah, I have small hands, so I actually prefer like smaller things to scrub with, so you know, you might be the same way, but they do make very nice facial scrubbies. So we are going to chain 13, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 chains. So we are going to work slip stitch in the back bump of our chain. So we're going to turn her over and work in the second chain from our hook. So here is the second one, and you're just going to work in that back bump. And what you're going to want to do is, especially because I'm using a smaller hook, you want to watch your tension. So we're working a slip stitch and do the same thing. So you just don't want to make these guys too tight, because that can really mess up your tension and also just be really difficult to work in. So we are going to continue to work our slip stitches. And I tend to be a tighter crocheter, so I really have to watch myself. And at the end of row 1, we will have 12 stitches. And slip stitch as a regular stitch is not used very often, so I think it's kind of fun to utilize a stitch that's not utilized very often. I like to use it for ribbing. I'll mix it up with other stitches, or of course you use it in the round to join. Alright, so there is our first row of row 1, and we are going to chain 1. Now slip stitch can be difficult to see, you know, where to work when you look at it like that. So you wouldn't, if you hold it more towards you like this, you can see the tops of your stitches. So here is your back loop, there is your front loop right there. Okay, so I'm chaining 1 and I'm turning. And for the edges here, I thought it might be fun to work 2 stitches in front loop. So I've chained 1. So again, if you're not sure, especially with this multicolored yarn, but when we turn her over like that, so this is the chain that I just made. This is the first stitch. This is the second stitch. So we are going to work in the front loop. And you can use that technique with any stitch too. If you're having trouble, you know, reading your work, knowing what the stitches are, just, you know, turn it towards you. Look at the top of it. It looks like a row of chains. So the first 2 I'm working in front loops only, and then for the next 8 we are going to work back loops only. So I'm turning it towards me and I'm working in back loops and trying not to get, oops, and don't do that. Trying not to get too tight. So we're going to work in back loops until we get to our last 2 stitches, and then we will work in front loops. Trying to create a little design instead of just like a plain boring swatch. I mean, it kind of is a swatch, but it's a swatch you'll be able to use because this is 100% cotton yarn. Alright, so there's our last 2 stitches. So I'm going to work in front loops like that. And there we go. So I'm going to chain 1 and I'm going to turn. So you can see these are the tops of our stitches right here. And we are going to work in front loops for the first 2 again. Come on, yarn, you want to split on me, don't split. No splitting allowed. Alright, so there's the first 2 working in the front loops, and we will continue to work in back loops. So again, turn it towards you so you can see the top of the stitch. So there it is right there. So we have 3 left, 1, 2, 3. So this one is back loop, and then the last 2 are front loop. Now we're going to chain 1 again. Now the rows can get kind of muddy here. Looks like it's a little hard to see, which it doesn't really matter because we just want to work as many rows until it's, you know, big enough for a little scrubby, a little square, or till I run out of yarn. One of the whatever comes first. So I'm going to chain 1 and I'm going to do the same thing, working in my front loop here. Now if you're having trouble deciding what is your front and back loop, I will show you a little trick that you can do. So this is a little trick that you can do. So we're getting ready to turn. I've already did my chain 1, and I do want to work in my front loop when I turn in my first stitch. So my last stitch here is going to turn into my first stitch. So what you can do is, because once we turn, then the back loop here will turn into the front loop. So you look at the top of your stitches right here, and so this is where I'm going to want to work when I turn for my next row. So you'll just take a little stitch marker, and I use my handy scrap piece of yarn, and I just pop that in there so that I know that guy is going to be the stitch I want to work in. So I've already chained 1, I'm turning, so these first 2 are going to be front loops. So I already know that's the front loop right there. Helps me out. And then the one right next to it is front loop. And then the rest of these guys are going to be back loops. And then except for the last 2 will be front loops. This is also good practice for, you know, with any stitch, getting you familiar with working in front and back loops, because there'll be other stitches, single crochet, double crochet, where the pattern might call for you to work in the front or back loop. So you really want to know, you know, what is the front loop, what is the back loop. So this is a nice little practice. Alright, so there are my last 2 stitches right here, and I'm working in my front loops. And it took me a little while to figure out what's the front and back loop, but once you get familiar with the stitch, then you know you can figure it out pretty well. Okay, so I'm going to keep going and see how many rows I can get. This is how much I have left, so we're going to see what we can do with this. Hopefully I have enough for a little scrubby, and I will see you when I am finished. So when you're going to chain 1 turn, so your first 2 stitches you'll work in your front loops, then your next 8 stitches you'll work in the back loops, and then the last 2 stitches you'll work in the front loops again. And then you'll just keep repeating that until, you know, your scrubby is long enough. Okay, so I have finished my little scrubby here. I worked until I ran out of yarn, and this is what I had left, so you know, you can't beat that. I'll have some fun trying to weave that in, but what I'll probably do is I will probably split it like that and weave it in that way, and that way you can hide the ends a lot easier. But I'm actually quite loving this little scrubby. I think it turned out really cute. Has a little bit of flexibility there, and I like the way of, you can see that it has like a little bit of an edge, so you know there's some kind of a thought process going on there with using the front loops only. So I think this is a nice little scrubby here. So I will probably put this in my Scrubby container in my bathroom and use this when I wash my face to add to my other ones. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this project, this little scrap project here, and I thank you so much for watching.